Wednesday. At 10 o'clock on the next day, the hawk had not seen humanity for 4 hours, although he was sharp as set. He had probably also been asleep during that time, unless the daylight and uncertainty would have kept him awake, so that, although he was hungry, he was partly liberated from the imposition of a human personality. He would no longer step to the glove as he had done since 3 o'clock, but again fled from rafter to rafter as if he were just out of the basket. It was a setback in the process of success, and it caused a scene. A hawk was held by a pair of jesses, one on each leg, which were united at the ends remote from the leg by means of a swivel through which the leash could be passed. One of Goss's jesses being worn out at the swivel hole, it had been impossible to pass the leash, a leather bootlace in my case, through its proper swivel. I could not attach the swivel. For that matter, I still lacked a swivel. So the two jesses had been tied together, and then knotted to a piece of string for leash. Why the leash had not then been tied to a perch, thus preventing his escape, I am not able to remember. Probably I had no perch. And anyway, I was in the position of having to discover all these things by practice. It has never been easy to learn life from books. The upshot was that now, loping away from his tormentor on silent wings, the bird caught his leash on a nail and hung head downward in rage and terror. It was in this mood that we were to begin his first full day. And the curious result of it was that immediately he had been secured, he began to eat ravenously, standing square and easy until he had consumed a whole leg. He was always more amenable after a good fuss, as I found later. Chapter 11. Tuesday. When we had dipped the hawk's tail in boiling water and were first able to get a better view of it, a grievous fact had come to light. Goss was suffering from a hunger trace. If a growing eyas was stinted in his food, say for a day or two, the lengthening feathers would add a weak section during those days. The stamina might be picked up again, and the feathers might continue to increase in length, healthy and strong, but always until the next year's molt, the telltale weak section would lie like a semicircular slash across the full-grown plume. It was not that it made any difference from the point of view of appearance, but the feathers were actually weak at the hunger trace, and would probably break off at it one by one. With Goss, 2 had already gone, one of them before he came to the cottage. Now a bird with damaged feathers was the same as an aeroplane with damaged fabric. As more and more feathers broke off, the bird would become more and more incapable of efficient flight. And since the feathers rested upon one another, as soon as one was broken, the next one to it was liable to go. For this reason, broken feathers had to be mended by a process called imping. Most people who have been compelled to read Shakespeare for examinations will be familiar with the word. Imp out our imperfections with your thought, or imp out our drooping country's broken wing. The stub left in the bird was trimmed. A piece of feather corresponding to the part broken off was selected from the store kept handy since last year's molt. An imping needle, sharpened at both ends and triangular in section, was dipped in seccotine or brine, and the 2 parts were joined. Goss had a hunger trace, a visible threat that sooner or later the art of imping would have to be practiced on the living bird. The effect of this blemish was to make one frightened of giving him another while his feathers were still growing. All except the 2 deck feathers were already hard-penned. And the result of this fear was that one's first object was to fill him with food. I did not realize it for many days, but actually he was being fed far too well. The troubles which arose during the previous and the next week were due to the fact that, in ignorance of his normal cubic content, the tetchy princeling had been reduced to a condition of acute liverish repletion. I, for my part, was trying to teach him to fly a yard or 2 toward me, by holding out a piece of meat, and he, for his part, was certain of one thing only, that he detested the very sight of it. I could think of nothing at first except to continue the old treatment. I would walk round and round Goss, holding out a rabbit leg, while he baited whenever it came too close, and then I would come away without feeding him. There was nothing about it in the books. It became more and more apparent that there was something wrong. His mutes were heavily and with effort dropped, not slashed out with a proud squirt as they had been in the habit of doing in my eye, and they were bright green. I wondered innocently if he could have eaten some gall with his liver last night. Was his bile induced by his mood, or his mood by his bile? The book said nothing about emerald mutes, and so one could do nothing about them. Anyway, Goss had not eaten all day and was in a terrible state of nerves. I proposed to go to bed, to get up at 1 a.m, and to spend the night with him. It gave one the sense of doing something definite at least. "He shall eat when he jumps to my fist for it, not before," I wrote hopefully in the day book. "Starvation is the only cure for stomach troubles. But perhaps tomorrow give him some egg? He shall eat when he jumps to my fist for it, not before." If only we had stuck to that sensible pronouncement, his training would have been shortened by 3 weeks. But the mind was a slow adventurer's, feeling its way alone in the dark, an amateur's 400 years too late for guidance, a tyro's in such curious matters, and terrified by the hunger trace, with the eventual necessity of imping it.